Time to pack up and go home. I love to sing. This is a great music. What? Okay. No, can't beat it when you sing. I like that because if you're listening to radio, are you really involved? If singing, sometimes you may snap your finger. Other times you might not do that. But yet, as when we sing together, we are together in praising the Lord. And that brings us closer together, and that is what Christianity is all about. This morning, I want to talk about two maps. I like history. I enjoy it. And when I see something come together, it actually gets really exciting. I was listening to a program about the Jews being kicked out of England. And that meshed together with the Black Plague that was in Europe. And let me get started. I want to start back with the children of Israel. Now, the children of Israel had been in slavery for 400 years. They probably had lost a lot of knowledge that they had from given to them by God. They probably had forgotten the Sabbath if they were forced to work 7 days a week. They probably had forgotten a lot of the things that were necessary, a lot of the hygiene things. And when they were brought out of Egypt, they came to Mount Sinai, the mountain of the Lord. And that was his way of bringing them back to him, teaching them the things they've forgotten, having them understand what the importance of that relationship with their God was. And on top of that, there was a lot of things that had to happen if they were going to be traveling through the desert. There was a lot of logistics in how they would move. There was a lot of logistics, how they would treat certain things. And what that became was the Levitical law. That Levitical law taught some very big concepts, and it taught some very small concepts. One of my favorites is about the clay pot. And if we turn to Leviticus 11:33, we'll talk about it for just a second. And it said, if one of them, meaning unclean things, fell into a clay pot, everything in it would be unclean, and the pot had to be broken. Now that's just a small thing, right? That's just a very small part of the Levitical law. But yet the importance of it is that if it was a terracotta pot that was unglazed, actually whatever fell into it would be absorbed into that pot, and it would have to be broken, because otherwise there could be infection or disease that would come to the people who used that pot. In fact, I did that just last week. I'm kidding. I didn't do that last week. But one of the big things was the quarantine. And if somebody was sick, they would have to go to the priest. The priest would give a diagnosis and say, you're going to have to go out of the camp. And you're going to have to stay out of the camp until things get cleared up. Now, in the case where the priest saw, say, white spots on their hands, or white spots on their body with numbness, the priest would say, you're going to have to go, and sorry to say, unless this clears up, you're going to be outside the camp permanently. And that would be leprosy. That was one of those things. So quarantine was a big thing. Now let's go back to Ring Around the Rosie. Anybody play that as a child? Anybody can remember the words to that? Where did that come from? The Black Plague. Ring around the rosy, pocket full of posies. There was a thought that posies would actually protect them against the plague. Not true. And ashes, ashes, we all fall down. Now, I played that. I remember playing it all the time, going around, falling down. It never meant anything to me. And how did it last for 800 years? But it did. I don't know. Kids, do you guys do Bring Around the Rosie? All right, thank you. So we're still doing it, generation after generation. On the map, there's a map if you want to go home and look it up on the internet. It will actually show you a timeline of where and when different plagues came. And it was interesting to note that most of the plagues prior to the Great Plague were small, and they were in places that were very populated. We had Mesopotamia various times. There was Egypt along the Nile various times. There was Alexandria various times. But yet it didn't move. The plague had to have population to move. And Europe, for one, had a tremendous growing season over a number of years. Warm weather, good rains, abundant food. That meant more people, growing populations, and it was ripe for the plague. The Great Plague started in China, though, interestingly enough, and about a third of the Chinese population died by the plague. The plague followed the very thin thread of the Silk Road. That was not a huge thing. There was very little population, but there was enough traffic on that road bringing silk, bringing jade, bringing goods that Europeans really craved, and it was carried along on camel caravans. And the first point where it met Europe was a drop-off in the Crimea, which was a very important port for bringing goods to Europe. And boats would go to the Crimea. They would travel through the Black Sea into the Mediterranean, and it first made landfall with 12 boats when it touched down in Sicily in the city of Messina. From there, probably other boats carried it to other ports. Port cities were heavily, the death toll was tremendous, much more than a third, maybe 3/4. From there, it spread out as people fled. If you remember the famous etching that showed rich people fleeing with their carriages, and on the back were the skeletons kind of laughing that they weren't going to be getting away, that the plague followed populations. Now, if you look at a map, of the plague, you'll see that there are certain spots. There are certain spots that are untouched. Now we're going to move back to 1264. The landing in Sicily was 1347. We're going to go back to 1264. In Poland, there was a prince, Boleslav. He wrote a charter of rights for Jews that were living within Poland. And they were given rights that they would not be forced baptisms, that there wouldn't be blood libel, there wouldn't be the agitation that Jews in general were receiving regularly in Europe. So in 1290, I mentioned this, that the Jews were forced out of England. And there were false accusations, and they had a personal invitation that said, please come to Poland. We have a place for you here. We have laws for you here. And they made that trip to Poland. Now, the map that I was talking about of the places that were not touched by the plague, one were the Great Pyrenees. Were there a lot of people there? No. The other were the lowlands of Holland. Were there a lot of people there? No. Milan was a large city that escaped a lot of death. And they escaped because they had quarantines. And the other very large area was Poland. And they had a quarantine. They also had Jews, and they also had the knowledge of hygiene. Now, for those Jews who were outside of Poland, they were persecuted during the plague. There were accusations that said, you are bringing the plague on us. And it was an easy way to push off and say, this is a good reason to kill you. This is a good reason to get rid of you. Number one, you're successful. Number two, you are not getting the plague. You must be poisoning our wells. And other crazy kind of accusations. But the Jews that were in Poland lived well. They had their rights. The death toll in Europe varies greatly. And again, that varies with with the reality of what is the population. Let's turn over to Hebrews 11:16. Hebrews 11:16. Got to see where I am here. Or 11:6, I'm sorry. And without faith it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. I think if we come to this time, I don't know how long ago this was, probably about 9 years ago, there was an article in National Geographic, and the idea of it was, where in the world do people live the longest? Yes, I heard the word there. And they had Sardinia, they had a place in Japan, I think it was Okinawa. And I'm forgetting the other ones, but the other one they really focused on was Loma Linda. They said, how do people live so long there? And I think we see through the ages there is a light that God shines on those that take these things seriously. That we have rules, we have laws, we have diets that predict we will be living at least 8 years longer than other people. And that isn't just vegetarians, Adventists who are vegetarians, but really it's an aggregate of all of us. It's an average of all of us. I've seen other places where they've repeated this and they were suggesting 12 years longer. And you say, well, what are the blessings of the Lord? What blessings have we received? We've received a health message. And that health message doesn't guarantee us that we will live that long. Sadly, some people die of other causes. But yet, on the average, we have that benefit. And that benefit shines out all around us. People know, or people see, and people think, and they'll ask questions. Why do you eat this way? Why do you avoid this meat? Why do you have vegetables? Why do you have so many vegetables in your lunch? And those questions open us up. What does God want for us? Go ahead. Life more abundantly. Very good. God gives us life, not only gives us life, but he gives us life more abundantly. My grandfather, I'll go ahead and tell you the whole story because it indicts me as a young man. I went to visit him and I had the smell of tobacco on me for a reason that I was smoking every now and then. And I had hardly stepped in the door when he put the finger on me. He didn't mess around. And he told me a story. He said, my brother and my grandfather was a big man, tall, strong. He was a block contractor, block layer, you name it. He said, my brother could reach down and grab the fender, not the fender, but the bumper of a Model T Ford, and he could lift that up off the ground. And I thought, well, that's good. And I said, well, how long did he live? And he said, well, he smoked, but he lived to 70. And I said, well, that's not too bad. But then he got serious. He said, the last 15 years of his life, his quality was terrible. The quality of life. Now, he lived to 95, and he was sound and fit right to the end. So was that a light? Was that shining? He would do lesson study. He would do, I don't know how much preaching he did, but yet he was a light to the world. He was a light to those around him. And really that's our goal, is that when people see us, what do we want them to see? We want them to see Jesus within us. We want to see Jesus coming out, his glory, whether it's a smile, whether it's a hello, whether it's how are you feeling today? Yesterday one part of our curriculum is that the teachers actually have an hour and a half, and we go in and we talk about things that are important, things that we might change, tweak. How can we get to reach these students? How can we turn on that desire to learn? A lot of different things. And a woman, one of the teachers, came in, and all of a sudden she started crying. And I didn't understand all the being a guy. I didn't really understand. But I didn't get the story. But it sounded like her daughter was, missing, and she was very upset about it, obviously. And the other ladies were saying, well, she's probably hanging out with somebody. She's probably doing this or that. And I thought this morning, I just need to send her a note. And I just sent her a quick note, and I said, we're praying for you. And, that's just one step, but it's an important step. I know she's a Christian. I know she is a believer. And I'm happy to extend that and say, we're praying for you. Next step, what can we do for you? Next step, how do we show Jesus to others? I think in our ways, Heidi and I have talked about how things are different there. One of those differences is a lot of times it seems like everybody's preoccupied, everybody's running, and everybody's missing each other. Till the point that you have to, you can stop for a minute and talk. And then break that ice. And then show Jesus' love to you, to somebody else. Let it shine out. Maybe somebody looks sad. What can we do? How can we cheer you up? Somebody's tired. What happened? That's my kid. That's one thing that we both have in common is that when a kid comes to school tired, first thing I ask is, are you staying up? Are you playing on your phone? Are you playing on your computer till 4 o'clock in the morning? Oh no, I never do that. Oh yes, you do, and I know. And you follow that up with a phone call home. It's like, where's your phone? Where are you putting your phones? Are you locking them up at night? Which actually some parents do. But that's what Jesus wants. And I think what we're talking about earlier is just like a little glimmer that sparks in your mind what Jesus wants us to do. The salvation of Poland, or the Jews in Poland, were a help to who? The Polish people. In fact, this let me go to another. I'll finish off by going to another thing. 1492. What did Columbus do? Sailed the ocean blue. Absolutely. What else happened in 1492 in Spain? Jews were expelled. Muslims were expelled back to Africa. And also in Germany, Jews were expelled, and the majority of those people followed the same path to Poland. Now, when we're talking about Poland, the size and shape of Poland, Belarus, the Baltics, Ukraine, has been in shift over the years. It's been overrun by, Genghis Khan. Everything has changed so many times, but yet the Poles the Jews had a safe place to be, whether it was Belarus, whether it was the Baltics, and large parts of the Ukraine for 800 years until the Nazis came in and exterminated so many. But yet, that light shone out. And I think God is calling us to be a light to the world. He doesn't want our light under a basket. He doesn't want us so tired we can't reach out to others. He doesn't want us to walk by when we know in our hearts we need to make that stop. We need to talk with others. We need to show God's love to others. Amen.